Ladies and gentlemen of the Chamber, Council, judges, we live in a world where I can get a pizza, chips and a drink in Apache for only £5. We live in a world where I can answer virtually anything with the word mood and people will accept me and they'll love me. And we live in a world where a robot cuts our fucking grass. This sounds pretty unreal to me, and I have no idea how this could possibly get any better. So I'm just going to quickly respond to what we heard from the last speaker there before I get on to how we should judge this debate, why the world is pretty great now, and some stuff like that. But what did we hear from the last speaker? So I think the last speaker assumes that bad things lead to goodness. I think firstly she probably doesn't tell us how that happens other than just like, things were pretty shit before, but now look, we're actually okay. And I don't think that actually tells us how you get from A to B very clearly. But I think that also the problem with referring to the past is the past of the problems that they talk about just aren't as big. Because like slavery, yes, is incredibly bad for one group of people, but I think it doesn't mean like world-ending stuff. Considering climate change is world-ending stuff, I think that is a different thing that you should be judging this debate on. But also I think the problems with great scientific advancement is that the problems just get bigger and bigger. The more that you want to talk about how great like society is now, the more the problems have to grow with it, because that's just the nature of things. If you're going to be dealing with like bigger toys, then obviously it's going to up the ante. But I think when they're talking about places like Kenya and Zimbabwe, it fails to deal with the real people who need to change in this debate, people like the US, people like the EU, but some is just not good enough, and we think those actors are the most important. But like best case, what we hear from that last speaker is that we will survive in 100 years. I don't think that is the debate here. I think the debate is, will we be better off? Like survival isn't the thing here. It's, is it good now and will it be better in the future, or is it just going to be the same? Like I think that just it needs to be better in the future for that last speaker to stand. So what this means to the debate is, despite how optimistic that last speaker is, I think she fails to give us the real metrics of it. So how do we really judge this debate? I think it should be judged off general happiness, because this is accessible for everyone in whatever like conditions they exist, in whatever society we end up living in 100 years, even if it's hanging by a thread. I think is the only way of actually assessing how well people are getting on is how happy they are. So really, I don't think the people are ever happier, because they always find things to whinge about, since that's just like how society works. So we always think like that person has more than me, that's not good enough. But also because they never have a collective memory of how bad it was before, so they have nothing to compare it against. That's like why a bunch of people who voted for Brexit really thought that they were going to be better off living in the trenches than they were living with like an immigrant next door. Like that's the kind of mindset that people have, because they just don't have that collective memory. What that means for this debate is that people will never be happier in 100 years, so I think the opposition has to win, but I'll still give the rest of my speech. Okay, 3 reasons why we're not going to exist in 100 years. 1, climate change. I think the world is burning. In fact, I know it. Dublin is already half underwater, given by the weather, and that did more than just messing up my hair for this evening. It also is like just generally bad for the world. But we're not combating it at an effective rate, rather than obsessively buying keep cuts and, like raiding vintage shops. I don't think that's good enough, even though the last speaker thinks it is. I think even if we look at someone as inspirational as Greta Thunberg, like nothing has happened as a result of those protests. Realistically, in a few years, she'll have nothing to live for. She'll give up all hope and possibly have a drug problem. I don't know. I think that this is just so how severe this issue is. Laughing aside, climate change is a massive harm that the proposition cannot obfuscate or deny if they want to be contention in this debate. But secondly, let's talk about alien invasion real quick. So I think that because we've stopped funding NASA, it is far more likely that we're going to have an alien invasion than ever before. We didn't just have the organizational structure to even storm Area 51. Like, how are we going to ever fight off the aliens? That means we are still relying on the government to use their... You know what, I'm intrigued, so sure.
If the aliens win, and they probably will, how is that not better?
Okay, so, I feel like the aliens might have some good stuff going on, but at the same time, they're more likely to enslave us because we're clearly quite stupid and weak. They don't want us to do any more than slavery work. Like, you're going back in time. Considering you said slavery was bad a minute ago, we'll stick with that. Okay, so I think the separation between the people and their defense is a clear weakness that I think aliens will quickly jump on, especially when people in the Hiss keep running around telling them that they want to colonize Mars. I think that's a direct threat on the Martians, that they're going to come back against in a big way. No, thanks. Okay, thirdly, all-out nuclear warfare. I think when Trump eventually gets tired of playing on his phone, he will likely try and figure out what that big red button on his desk actually does. It may take a few months for him to discover what it does, but I think that especially when an antagonist such as Kim Jong-un has the same power, it is likely to result in something that is irreversible, be that nuclear warfare or just like the detrimental effect on international relations. I think that also, even if it isn't those two groups, it's things like China and other actors, Israel and other actors, or like Turkey and other actors. I think that looks like a massive conflict soon, and the tensions are high, and they're only going to get higher and kick off in the next 100 years, especially when we keep electing buffoons like Trump. But why will the world suck even if it does exist? This is best case scenario stuff, guys. Okay, here are a list of cool people who will likely be dead in 100 years. 1, Mary Berry. I think she is irreplaceable, and anyone who's watched the newest Great British Bake Off would definitely agree with me that it's just not the same. And you know what? She can't come back. You know, that's not good enough. Secondly, Dwayne Johnson. I think without America's muscular sweetheart, they are going to die out. They have no hope without him. And thirdly, I think Michael D. Ireland's international relations will definitely fall dramatically when we no longer have the tourist attraction of having a leprechaun as our president. I think that once we lose that, then we lose any kind of hope of having any trade with anyone. Fourthly, I think Barney, he's either cancelled because of child abuse scandals or something like that, but also a whole generation's morals were based off this dinosaur. And I think that's incredibly important because that means likely we're unlikely to have those morals into the future. And finally, me, because I'm the most important actor in any debate. Okay, here's a list of things that will no longer exist. 1, Trinity. It's probably going to melt due to acid rain, and then how will we tell everyone that we are winners? And where will the American tourists go if they can't just stand in front of us like a barricade? Secondly, spice bags. I think given the agricultural scene right now and the increase in veganism, it's reasonable to assume we'll have no more potatoes, and that's a bad thing. Thirdly, the Late Late Toy Show. It is not long now until Ryan Tubridy has a nervous breakdown mid-show due to another sassy child telling him that he can't understand a toy meant for 4 to 7-year-olds. That results in him having a massive tantrum on TV, and we lose that. That's terrible. Finally, sexy times. I think it's quite quickly becoming immoral to have kids since we are raising them to die, and there's no other reason to have intercourse according to both my mother and my Catholic education. Finally, I think that probably we're all going to be dicks to each other, because when things go tits up, that's when we start getting cutthroat, lads. I think if we look at the big freeze example a couple of years ago when there was a snow, I think that's when we started taking breads from elderly people. That's what you're looking at. I think that people start getting very aggressive when it's in times of conflict. That is something that we've already talked about. I think those squishy things the last speaker tells you about how we're all going to band together somehow. I just don't think that's true. People go out for themselves. That's how capitalism works. That's how we've always worked. So even if we as humans are capable of weighing up happiness and how good things are, I think all of these reasons would point you to believe it is definitively going to be worse. But comparatively, how does all that weigh up to now? I think firstly, we have all the cool things that I just listed and all the cool people that I just listed. That's pretty great. Secondly, I'm pretty chuffed right now, and as I said, most important actor right here. And finally, I think we still have incentives to cause change right now and make a difference in today's world. In the future, we're rapidly losing that hope, and therefore we are unlikely to try to make those improvements the last speaker talks about. I think that means that we lose out on all those benefits in the future. So even if she wanted to accrue some of them, I think it's very unlikely that she does. It's very unlikely that the proposition is able to stand in contention in this debate unless they deal with the actual metric of how you judge it and how you judge it based on happiness rather than anything else. For all these reasons, so happy to oppose.